Everyone, welcome to another session of Everything Js. Today, we are talking about callback. So, in JavaScript, we have functions called callbacks. Um, okay, I think there are JS developers here, right? So, anyone can explain what is callback according to your experience? Anyone? No. Okay. Let's consider an example. So let's say there's a button on your own web page. So what you need to do is you need to do something when someone click on that button. So let's say you need to uh, make an alert or maybe call to external API or maybe print something on the console or something like that. So basically, uh, even though we have to do that, the problem is you don't know when the user is going to click that button, right? So that's the problem. So you have the button, but you don't know when the user is going to click that one. So what you need to do is like you define an event handler like this for the click event, and that event handler accept a function like this. In line number 3, you can see we have a separate function in there. So that function will be called when an event is triggered. So this is called callback. So basically, we are calling to this function as callback function. So when someone click on this button, this will be called. So according to the definition, the callback function is a function which that can be passed into another function as a variable. So we call that the outer function as high order function. So inside that function, we can do something, maybe asynchronous operation or maybe synchronous operation. I mean, we can immediately call to the callback function. Once we do that, the callback function will be called. So in the previous screens, I will explain how to do that. So as you all know, it's a common to wrap your all JS code inside load window load event, right? Because when we open our web page on your web browser, so you need to get some, there's some alert. Now the page has loaded. The page loading process is completed, something like that. So what you do is basically you attach, like previous example, you attach a load event listener to the window object and then pass an anonymous function to that specific event handler. So when the page is loaded, this anonymous function will be called. So what do you think about this code? What will be the output of that? Yeah, so you can say.
First of all, use start. That's it.
Start and window.
Okay. Anyone? No. Yeah. Because the callback function, this callback function will wait until the page is loaded. So then after that callback function will be called. So you know from the previous session, you know the JavaScript execute these things first and then go to the event listener and take the callback function and execute them.
And here the key take is now if you take a look at line number 3, it has a add event listener, right? Add event listener function is called on top of window. Window is a browser API. DOM DOM API is provided by the browser and it is not part of JavaScript. So this particular code which we have here in line number 3, window.add event listener is not something specified in the JS code. That is coming from browser, and that browser API will asynchronously call this particular load event handler when page is loaded.
Yeah. Basically, when we check our JavaScript code base. Basically, let's say if we have a JavaScript project, in there you can see so many callback functions, not in the DOM events. We have explained some DOM event to explain the callback function previously, but here I want to tell you we can use callback function almost everywhere. I mean, there are so many situations like that. One common example is by using timers. You know, JavaScript set timeout also a function, and it accepts function as a press argument. So we can pass a function. Here we have anonymous function as a callback function, and we have given some time in millisecond to execute that callback function within the given time period. So here I think it's simple. So what will be the answer here? Yeah. Okay. So
And before going to the next slide, one other thing is now here we mentioned that there are functions without a name. Now, if you take a look at this, if you take a look at line number 3, set timeout, to that function we are passing a function without a name, so that is called the anonymous function. You can even pass the named function, or you can define or declare a function outside of this function and again pass that function reference to this one. So it all depends on how you implement it. Either way, as long as you have a function reference or a function or anonymous function, you can pass it here.
yeah. So in callback, let's we can define. I mean, we can use callback as I said earlier as asynchronous callbacks and also synchronous callbacks. So to understand the situation, we can make simple calculator like this. But this is not a calculator as you see. But I think it's a sample one. But so as we described in earlier the previous screens or maybe slides, you can see here we have two buttons called add button and sub button, and in the line number 33 and 34 we have added event listener for these buttons, because when someone click on these buttons we need to get that action as I explained in the first slide. So here you can see in the line number 20 and 25 we have two functions. Now these are not the anonymous function, we have given some name as I say. So now we have passed this function to this event listeners in line number 33 and 34. So when someone click on the add button, the add event function will be called, and same as the subscribe event. And also we have defined separate function called cal by giving some parameters like num1 and num2 and type. And inside the add event function, we have called to that function by giving some hard-coded value, right? With the type, the operation type. So what we need to do is like when someone click on this button, we call to, let's say when someone click on add button, we call to add event function, and it will call to the cal function by giving these parameters. So here we have switch cases, and according to the given case, it will do the operation and return the value. So the value will be taken to this variable, and it will be printed. So here is the sample calculator, but what do you think about this code base? Can we optimize this one, or maybe what are the limitations or maybe issues we have in this code? Let's say we need to add more operation, like let's say find sign value and cost value, something like that, or maybe do some complex algorithm inside that one to improve the calculator. So what are the limitations we have if we use the same mechanism, same implementation? How we can improve this? Or maybe we need to abstract the calc function as much as possible. So here we have your switch and some other operation to the cases, but using callbacks, we can abstract calc function like this. We can define some, let's say, separate functions for each operation. Let's say for to get the sum value, we can define a function. Also for the subtraction like that, and we multiply and divide, and also find sine value and cos value or tan value something. So we can define the separate function for these operations, and then we can see this as a, I mean, these functions doing single responsibility. I mean, they have their own responsibility.
This pattern has a name.
Yeah.
Anybody? Have you ever used this in any other languages, this particular pattern? It's a simple. Any guesses?
Sure.
Yeah, strategy. So, one other key thing is in JavaScript also, like in any other language, you can use any of those patterns. The implementation details are little different. You don't have all those classes and whatnot. You can use classes, but whatever the patterns you have, design patterns and everything, all of them are applicable here also.
Yeah.
And again, key highlight is about function callbacks. You can use function callbacks to implement this.
Yeah. So here, now we have changed the cal function a little bit, and here we can let's move to this line number 22. When someone click on the add button, this function will be called, and in there we can pass the operation. I mean the operation function as callback function, because this cal function now we have changed to accept a function as a callback function. So whenever it get that function, it call to that specific function and do the operation and return the value like that. And here we have checked the callback parameter whether it's a function or not, because it's very important when we develop callback, because otherwise it can be a string value or int value, right? So there can be some issues. So we need to validate them like that.
And
So
we will cover all the operators and whatever the internal details of these things in later sessions. We have different sessions for those.
yeah, and I want to mention another thing also here. I mean, before I start this one, I told you we can define, I mean, we can get callback function as asynchronous and synchronous, right? So here you can see we are waiting, I mean, to get something inside to this function, we are waiting until click event happens, right? So this is called asynchronous callback. So we are waiting for something, and after that we are calling to that specific function. But here, as soon as we call to this function, it will immediately call to this one and it will return the value. So we are not waiting to get something, I mean, for the asynchronous things. So these kind of things we can define as synchronous callback. So, but most of the cases we are not, I mean, practically we are not using, I mean, when we develop our code base, we are, most of the time we are using asynchronous callback. But there are, I mean, there are some implementation using synchronous callback as well. So here you can see one example. Here we have for each. I think all JavaScript developers or maybe other developers also know about for each. So if we develop, if we, let's say, execute this code, what will happen? What will be the output?
Start 1, 2, 3.
Start
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3 and end. Okay, so yes, it happens like that, and I think if you can understand, let's say if you can see what is happening inside the for each function, I think it will be really good, right? So how it works. So basically, you can see the for each implementation from the documentation, and here is the for each function implementation. it also use callback function, because here you can see the for each function accepted another function. So here we can pass anonymous function like this, or maybe we can define separate function and we can pass into here. What it does is basically take this anonymous function as a callback function and do some kind of operation. I mean the validation and how many arguments we have passed, something like that. And also there are some other thing as well. I mean the what type of execution context we can provide this for it, because it's in the later sessions I think you will learn about those things. However, I want to mention here they have used while loop. Even though we call, I mean the define as a for loop, inside that one it will work as a while loop. So inside that one they have done some kind of validation, and when they get a value from each iteration, they will call the callback function, and that value will come to here. So that's how it's work. So, and in JavaScript, you know the while also blocking operation. So that's why we are getting this kind of response, even though we have, let's say, the thousands of numbers. So we have to, I mean, the entire code will be blocked until it finished. Then only we can get the end value. So there are concepts we can improve this kind of blocking thing, but you will learn those in future sessions. So as I said earlier, we can see synchronous function as I mentioned earlier, I mean the for each and the map filter function, but most of the cases we are using asynchronous callback for your application, for our applications. Basically, you can see the simple example like this. Now we know what is the response of this one, and the other example is like this. I think you know to get some information from a remote URL, we can define that operation like this. This is the get request, and here you can see the XHR has already state change event. That event also accept a function. Here we can take this as a callback function, because this one will take some time to let's say get ready. So when some operation happens, let's say now it has received the response from the remote server, something like that. So in such cases, this function will be called, and here we can do some kind of validation, and then we can get the response like this. So here we are waiting until some operation happen, and then only we get the response.
And another thing is here in set timeout, so that function itself we are accepting the callback function, right? But in this case, it's a bit different where you have a variable called, class level property called onReady state change, and you can set a function to that. And internally, what happens is when you call send function on XHR, it will send the request and wait until it gets the response. And once after it gets the response, it will internally check whether there is a function set to onReady state change. If it is available, it will call that internally. So this is another approach on how you can use callback functions. It's not just passing a function to a function, and there are various ways you can pass a callback function to anywhere. Basically, as long as you have a function reference, and if you are calling it inside a function, then same behavior applies.
Yeah. Basically, here are the not all but some usage of the asynchronous callback function. You know, in order to get some data from remote source, as we say earlier, we can use callback, and retrieving location data from geolocation API. You know, modern browser support for these APIs. Browser itself has some APIs provided for. We can use in our JavaScript code. This also the same API as geolocation API. It is provided by browser. It's a media capture API. Using this API, we can get the camera feed and maybe get that feed feed into our HTML view and display it. Or maybe when we are implementing some video calling application, we can use this kind of APIs. So here, the usage of the callback function is like we have to wait until the camera alone, right? And until it stream is get ready, something like that. So I think you can go to the documentation of these APIs, then you can check how it works. And the other thing is listen for events. As we see earlier in the XHR also, we have some events when they when they invoke, basically when something happened to in some cases we can get notified to that specific function which we have given for these event functions, and we can see these kind of things in DOM events and also web shortcuts as example, and there are so many areas like that. And also we can develop our own events to get some, let's say if we are developing chat application, then we can do some animation or something like that with the events.
In the previous slide, let me add something else also. These APIs, all of these are coming from browser. They are not JavaScript. JavaScript functionality, if you are writing something purely in JavaScript, then there is no such thing called asynchronous. It's all synchronous. And whatever the browser provided APIs provide you a way of doing things asynchronously, and you can hook into those and run code asynchronously, whatever the things asynchronously, and get it back to the JavaScript. And again, in JavaScript, it's all single-threaded and it will run sequentially. So whatever the synchronous callbacks you have, they are all provided by the browser.
Within JavaScript also we can implement callback behaviors, right?
We can implement, but there is no such thing called asynchronous.
Not by default, but say if we have a time-consuming processing to be done within JavaScript,
then we have to use a browser API. We have to use set timeout or some kind of approach. End of the day, whatever the synchronous behaviors, if you want to do something asynchronous, JavaScript doesn't have anything to support it. Browser APIs does. In Node environment again provides different APIs. JavaScript spec never specifies anything with asynchronous. I mean, like how to create asynchronous functionality, because it doesn't support that, right? You can't create a thread in JavaScript. You can handle those with async, await, and promises. They have provided the ways of handling things which are coming from outside of JavaScript, but those are two different scopes. So you have to clearly understand what is provided by JavaScript spec and what is provided by browser or any other JS environment.
And I think it will be really good if you can see how the event loop works and the call stack, those kind of things, when you participate for these sessions. So I think it will be really helpful for us. Helpful for you. So then you can understand how we can do the multiple threaded tasks in JavaScript. So here there is an example by using the geolocation API. We have some simple implementation like this, get location function, and we have called to that function, and we are checking whether it's available or not from the browsers. If not, we are printing some not supported message. So otherwise, we call to method called get current position, and in there we have passed a function. That function will wait until this browser get the current position. As soon as it gets the current position, it will call to this function with the position object, from that position object we can extract the location. So that's how we can use that geolocation API to fetch the location. But here we have missed something. I mean, basically the current position method supports multiple callback arguments or maybe functions to this function. I mean, we can pass error callback function and success callback function likewise. If there are any, let's say, if something happened inside the API, some error, we can get that errors to separate function, separate callback function. Here we haven't implemented that function, but we can pass more callback function to this get current position function.
And I'm not sure whether we covered this in function session. Now, if there is a function, if you are developing a function and if you don't know the number of arguments you are going to get, say you want to develop a function which will accept any number of arguments and you want to do an operation on all of those numbers. In that case, you can use this special type object called arguments within the function. So within the function scope, if you simply try to access arguments dot length, then it will provide you the number of arguments passed to that particular function. And again, it is array-like, it is not array, and you can get all those arguments inside. So when he was mentioning that this accepts any number of callback functions, I don't know whether it's defined number of functions also, but in case if you want to develop something like that, you can use that particular object.
Okay, here is one example to explain about the multiple callback function. In jQuery, we have Ajax request. To fetch some information from the remote server, we can use Ajax. And here they have one parameter to pass the URL, and others are like success, complete, and errors, and there can be more. These parameters, and basically this function accept callback functions like this, success, errors, and complete like this. We can implement those things separately, and whenever, let's say, if there is an error occur, then it will call to error callback. If it is success, into success, or maybe if it is complete, it will call to complete. And also sometimes you have seen there are some kind of HTTP requests in JavaScript. We can get the progress of the call. If we need to get the, let's say, to download the image, and we need to add a progress bar. What is the percentage of the downloading process, something like that. So we can add that kind of implementation also there. Okay, so I think here we can move to another topic. What do you think about this one? What will be the output? Anyone? It is undefined. So I think you have learned about this in your function session. This related to execution context. Basically, here you have a function. In there you have separate execution context when it execute, not the defined process. And inside that one you have document body, which is a and document body on click, which is a DOM event listener. Here, if you try to access this outside this keyword, you can't access this, because when the on click event execute, it has executed by the DOM. So it is in the document.body object. So all this binding is related to that document.body. So it's not related to the outside function. So that's why we are getting this one. And also you have covered those things in the function session, so you can go to there and take a look. To overcome this issue, we can use these methods: bind, call, and apply. And these things also have explained in the function session. This is how we can pass, and we can use the bind method for the callback function. And here is an example to use apply, because I think you already know how we can use apply and call, and also bind. Bind is returning a function, but call and apply invoking a function, right? So we have to get understanding about their behavior, and we need to apply in the right position. So yeah.
So whenever you are calling a callback function inside your target function, you have to make sure that you are running it in the correct context. If you want to run it in the context of the target function, then you have to use either of these key, whatever the functions which are provided by function prototype. And if you have any doubts about all these call, apply, or bind functions, related functionality, you can refer back to the video we have uploaded.
Yeah. So, what are the problems we have with callbacks? What do you think? No? The main problem is like when we implement callback function, every callback actually develop nesting like this. So here we need to get users by user ID, and then get some user information passed to another endpoint and get the response, and from that response we need to request another thing and get the response like that. So you can see it's getting complex, right? So it's difficult to handle with callbacks. And here also we have listened to window load, and then button click event, and then timeout. This is example, but it also explain how the callback hell is work. I mean, basically we are calling to this kind of situation as callback hell. So to overcome this one, we can use modern features like promises and async array. These awesome features also will be described in the earlier.
So can you use the name functions instead of using anonymous functions, so that you will
Sorry?
in the previous slide you have all the anonymous functions, right? So the functions are anonymous.
Yeah.
So if you have named functions,
Yeah.
you will not end up with something like this.
Yeah. I mean,
Still the complexity is there, right? You are waiting until one is successful, and again within that function you are calling one other. It is not linear programming, right? When you think about it,
You want to make it asynchronous?
no. You have to understand the problem in hand. Here we want a response of one function successful. When it is successful, the response of that is required for the second one. Likewise, it goes in a chain. One should be successful to run the second one, and go back and forth. It will go one by one. In that case, you will end up with whole lot of callbacks nesting into a deeper level. And when you try to debug something like that, call stack itself is getting so complex, right? And again, it's really hard to understand what is going on, because it's all dependent on whatever the topmost context, and context handling gets complicated, because if you want to access something in the context of the topmost, root level function, then how would you do that? There are a whole lot of complexities when it comes to real world problems. I mean, when you are developing application, you might have a whole lot of dependencies, right? Like this. In that case, to avoid this, we can use promises and async array.
As you said, we can define these as separate function, but however, we have to pass these function to there. So still the callback.
It won't end up in a hell. It will be linear.
Yeah. To overcome these things, we can use these features. So you can read about this. I have added some references for this one, end of the presentation. And this is the things we can take as this practices when we implement the callback. So as you see, I think middle of the presentation, so we have to check whether the callback is a function only before we use it, and we can use arrow functions. I mean to control the context, because in your function session you learn about how we can use the same this binding to your inner function without changing the context. Likewise, you have set of you can find more than this one, but however when you implement your JavaScript code, try to implement your JS file in a readable manner. Whenever let's say if you need to read your JavaScript code, you have to be easily understand your code, and when you implement callback function, you have to think about is that okay to use normal callback, or is that okay to use promises or async with these kind of features? So you have to decide it by yourself.
And however, whatever the approach you use, even if you use promises, then again promise accepts a couple of callback functions only. So without knowing callback, you can proceed. But only thing is we can avoid callback errors and complexities. So for that you can use practices, all these things. You can make sure that it is a function and so on. But to get started, even to do anything in JS, you have to know callback functions.
Yeah, I think the important thing is this one. When you implement your callback function, you have to handle your errors in a proper way. Because basically, when you do something with the callbacks, you get the response and pass. Invoke the callback function, but you have to pass the errors as well. Otherwise, even though an error occur, you can't get that specific error to your callback function. So, yeah. Next session is objects by
Guy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And end of this presentation, I added the references which I have referred, and here you can see some the things, the callback errors and the script binding, these kind of things, and also some kind of execution context and the event loop, those kind of things as well. Please refer those, because there are more important things in there. Try to get understanding about this one. Thank you.
And make sure you go through all the videos beforehand. If you missed anything, even a single session, then whenever we are covering these, we are referring back to previous sessions, right? So it will be clear for all of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Question. Is there a timeout period in order to return a callback by the defined by the JavaScript, or is it defined by the browser?
There is no such thing called timeouts in JavaScript. It is coming from the browser APIs, right? If you are using a timeout, that timeout function is exposed by JavaScript. And again, when you are creating a callback function, that is not involved with time. There is no time series bound things in JavaScript, because it's all sequential. It will get executed in the order you are executing it. If you submit something to a browser API, it will make sure that it will handle it properly, and whenever a thing gets successful or rejected, it will call that particular callback function. And there, if you have a timeout, say in HTTP request, if you have a timeout set in that API, it will work in that manner. But in JavaScript, it's not time bound.
So sometimes like slow running script, OI messages and those kind of things coming from the browser or from the JavaScript?
Slow running scripts in what context?
So let's say there is a callback function and it takes time to process.
Yeah, so say if you are iterating through an array of huge number of items, then in that case, a browser will warn you that the script is running slow. In that case, it is just a pointer, because this JavaScript is single-threaded. until you complete whatever sequence in that sequence, whatever the operations in that callback, it won't run anything. There is only one thread. If you have a callback function and at that particular moment, if it is executing the code segments in that particular function, it won't do anything else. It will hold off everything and it will run that code segment, whatever the lines it has, and complete it and move to the next one. So event loop explains the whole behavior of how these callbacks are taken into the current main thread and how it is executed in this particular sequence. But key thing is, at a particular moment, at a particular time, it will only execute one operation, and that's it. You don't have threads.
So all those warnings and timeouts are coming from the browser.
Browser notifies you. Browser JavaScript engine notifies you, saying it doesn't come up in the UI, right? It comes up in the dev tools only. Or it crashes because it can't handle it. Browser can't handle it. That's why.
Any reference where like this is what is there in the JavaScript and this is coming from browser capabilities.
So whatever the JavaScript spec has set of features, we are going to cover everything here, all the spec related features, and everything apart from those features, everything is coming from browser APIs in browser context and in Node.js.
So it depends from one browser to the other, right?
No, browser APIs again has a standard. DOM API has a standard. HTML has its spec, right? So that spec defines everything, and CSS has its own spec. It defines everything, whatever the features it has. Likewise, there are different specs for all these different contexts, and we are talking about JavaScript for the moment, and we have a different session series for those as well. So it will come later on, and there are two different things. That is what you have to understand. What is JavaScript and what is browser API? Because JavaScript can be adapted to implement anything. It is not something where you can only use in browser, right? If you want to use JavaScript in, I don't know, maybe build an airplane control system application or something, you can do that. There's no browser running in that, right? As long as you have a JavaScript environment, you can do that. Be it engine is public, you can simply fork it and you can build your own node-like environment, which runs in, I don't know, in some other environment. So it all depends on what you're exposing. So JS engines are written in C++, and they are in that engine, they define all these functionalities, whatever the timeout related things and everything, with C++ native threads, whatever the ways they use, and what they do is internally they will call whatever the callback functions we are providing whenever that is successful or failed. So basically, it will do the asynchronous task and let JavaScript know, okay, I'm done. You take on. And JavaScript has a single thread.
Yeah, it waits.
Yes, it waits, and to understand that, you have to understand event loop.
Yeah.
That has a differentiation. It is the key to understanding JavaScript.